One of the great things about the M7CL is its flexibility. So let's dive into the setup menu and talk about some of the different things that you can change. We'll start with user setup. In user setup, you have a lot of different options. In the top left here, you have the store recall options. This just turns on and off the confirmations before you store or recall a scene. So this can get kind of annoying, so we have it turned off so that it doesn't pop up and say, are you sure that you want to store this, or are you sure that you want to recall this? Below this you have your patch. This confirms when you change a patch, it'll pop up and make sure that you're wanting to change this patch and you didn't accidentally just touch it. So that's what this patch confirmation is. It'll ask you if you're sure you want to change the patch. And then the steel patch confirmation, that pops up if you are changing a patch and that input was already patched to something else. So this can prevent you from accidentally messing up another channel by changing your patch. Same with outputs, where this is especially important. If you're patching an aux to go out one of the Omni outs and that Omni out was already used by something else, it'll pop up and tell you, hey, this one's already being used. Are you sure you want to change this? So we have that turned on. Sometimes I'll turn this off just so that it doesn't always prompt me on the patch change, but it will let me know if that one's already being used somewhere else. Now below we have our error message, and this lets you know if there's a digital error or a MIDI error, and that's a good thing to have turned on, especially the digital. Basically this lets you know if there's a sync problem, which could cause popping. If you get digital clicks, then that's probably a digital error. So that's helpful to know. If there's a digital error, then you know where your popping is coming from. Over here we have your panel operation, and these are some really useful options. The top here, auto channel select. If you turn this on your inputs and outputs, basically what this does is if you move the fader at all, it selects that channel. So that can be useful, but it can also be really annoying. So I normally actually turn that off because I don't want the fader to be selected every time I touch it. That can get a little annoying if you're not used to that. The next option here is queue select link. So what this does, if you queue up a channel or solo it, it also selects that channel. Now that is something that's pretty useful because most of the time if you're queuing up a channel, then you're probably going to be working on that channel, whether it be EQ or compression or gating, whatever it might be. So that's a good option to have on. The next option is navigation key ties to your select. So what this does is when you change the bank of 8 faders in the master section, whatever bank you select in the master section, it will also select a channel from that bank on the faders. So this can also be useful if you want it on. And then you can do it just for inputs or outputs. Now the next option, select, ties to the navigation key. That's definitely a very helpful thing that I usually do like to have turned on. What this does is if I select a channel, then it throws it into the master section. It automatically selects that group of 8 faders that channel is in. So this is definitely pretty useful. This next option, pop-up appears when pressing knobs, is another good one to have turned on. So if I turn this on, so if we push a knob over here to get us to our input view. Now if we push in one of the knobs in the EQ section, it pulls up the EQ window. Press it again, it goes away. You can do the same with your dynamics. If I press in the dynamics knob, the first dynamics window comes up. Press it again, it goes away. So if I go back to my setup menu and I turn that off, now I can press a knob and it takes me to my input screen, but if I press in EQ knobs, dynamics knobs, nothing happens. So I like that turned on. Makes things a little faster and a little easier to navigate. These next two options are related to recalling scenes. This first option determines which way the up and down buttons work here. So currently we have scene +1, -1, which means when we push up, it goes up numerically to scene 3, to scene 4, 5. But if we actually look here, when you push up, it's going down in the list. So it's kind of a little backwards there in that, but numerically it's going up and down. Now if we go back over here, we change this to list up and down, when you use the buttons, if I press down, numerically it's going backwards. It's actually going up. But if I go to the list and I press down, it's actually going down the list now and then up the list. So let's go back to our setup. And we can put it back on so that it goes numerically with the scene instead of with a list. Now, list order. What you can do is reverse your list, and then if you do the list up down, now everything works right. So if we go here and we push up, it's going up on the list and up numerically, down on the list, down numerically. And actually, if we go back over here, you could leave you could leave that this way and it would still work right. You're still going up and down. Up goes up numerically, and it also goes up in the list. So that's how that works. All right, our next page is our user-defined keys. This lets you set up your user-defined keys located in the master section. Now, this is pretty cool. You can do a lot of different things with this. A really common thing is to do tap tempo. You select here, and here's where you tell it what you want the function to be. So you say tap tempo, and then you select here where your delay or reverb unit is in the rack that you want this tap tempo to control. So our delay unit is in rack 6, so we select tap tempo, rack 6, and then we're done with that. You can also do other things like selecting a mix and putting it on fader. So for instance, if you want it to put mix 1 on the faders, you would do sends on fader and then mix 1 and then hit OK. And now when you select user key 1, it would select mix 1 and put it on the fader. The next tab over tells you what user level you're at. Now we're using the administrator user level, so we can do anything we want to. Now over here you have your preferences for your guest. It's the same preferences, it's just for a guest user. So they can have their own set of preferences. And then this last tab is your user level for a guest. So what this does, if you lock out the console so that only you have administrator privileges, when other people use the console, you can limit what they're able to do. There are a lot of different parameters that you can control here in the user level. You can control certain channels. You can select a channel, and then you can deny them control of the head amp, which is the gain or the preamp control. You can turn off processing so that they can't do any EQ or compression or anything. It'll just lock it down as you have it set. And you can even turn the fader on and off so that they can't even turn the fader up even if they wanted to. And then below here you can prevent them from storing scenes so they don't overwrite any of your scenes. You can also prevent them from recalling scenes if you want to, or you can allow them just to recall but not to store. Same deal with the library list. You can prevent them from storing or recalling. And then you have files. You can prevent them from loading files. So this can be really useful to keep people from loading files that they shouldn't be loading. And then you also have your monitor set up. You can enable talkback, disable it, the oscillator, even some of the mixer setup, outports, which are just your outputs. So you can turn all this on and off so that you can really restrict the use of the console if you need to. You also have some of the different scene stuff here. You can keep them from changing input patches, input names, output patches, output names, bus setup, your effects rack. So this is really good, especially if maybe you have your facilities crew that's going to be using the console for just a simple gathering where they don't really need control of these things. And it's actually better if they don't. You know, something like the oscillator, you don't want them to accidentally put a tone on and then they can't figure out how to turn it off. Or you can lock out specific channels that should never be turned on in their event. So this is a really useful page. In the storage area, you have two options. You can create a user key, or you can save and load your show. When you create a user key, you can give that user specific access to all the different aspects of the console, and you store those settings to a USB drive. So the easiest thing to do is just get a small USB thumb drive and assign it to each of your users if you want to give them specific control over the console. And then when they insert that USB key into the console, it will automatically pull up their specific level of access to the console. So this is really useful, and you can password it and do some really cool stuff there. On the Save Load menu, this allows you to save and load files from a USB storage device. So you have to have a device plugged in. You can't store and load completely different settings from within the console. So here you would just name it comments. Pretty simple. You can make it read only so that people can't write over it if you want on your drive. So pretty simple how that works.